Hi, everybody, welcome. I'm going to get us kicked off. This is a session called Technologies in Teaching and Learning. I'm Renee Aline, and I'm going to be chairing today's session. Our first speaker is with us here, Beverly B. Ray. She will be presenting on the use of Twitter as a dispositional tool for teachers during the shift to emergency remote learning.
Thank you very much. And I really enjoyed just the few hours I've been here already because I've gotten I had to get some tech help, and they were very nice and cordial and helped me out a great deal. And learned some information about the building and all of the different labs and the design studios here. So I'm very excited about that. And thank you, Rob. He was a great help. He's making sure that I don't take care. It won't be his fault if I do. But you guys have been wonderful. Thank you. I'm Beverly Ray. I'm from Idaho State University. It's off of Interstate 15. We are roughly 2 hours from the west entrance to Yellowstone National Park, if you've heard of that. I live north of there, so I'm a little bit closer. So if you have any interest in wolves or moose or grizzly bears, let me know. I know you guys in Canada, you have those yourself, so you're not impressed by having them. But if you're from somewhere else, we do have grizzly bears, and we do have to have bear cans. So make sure they leave us alone and we stay clear of them. Oh, anyway, that's not the topic for today. We're going to talk about Twitter as a dispositional tool for teachers during the shift to emergency remote learning. So to keep it under 20 minutes, I've knocked down my 30-plus slide presentation. And so I put the draft paper up. So if you're interested in things like the literature review or the theoretical framework or more depth to the methodology, that paper's there for you. If those things bore you, we will move on and talk about the topic without those things in the interest of time. So I wanted to look at how teachers transitioned basically from March 10th, 2020 to March 31st. So a 3-week period as the pandemic started and as teachers had to, in North America, not just in the United States, had to transition out of their comfort zone, if you will, into teaching very often in a way, especially with K-12 teachers, that they never taught before. So that's what my interest was in. So to me, it's historic, but it's also useful in learning about how people respond to periods of crisis or chaos. And that can apply to situations where natural or human disasters occur as well. And so I wanted to see what happened and how they use social media, not knowing that Twitter would be purchased by a billionaire and become kind of, chaotic and unstable. And I'm like, I hope I get published before, they crash. So I guess I might start talking social media instead of Twitter, but I really did use Twitter and used a Twitter researcher account to look at some of the hashtags that teachers were using. And so again, only in that 3-week period did I look at. These evolved and changed over time, the hashtags. Pandemic teaching was not something people were talking about in March, but by the fall of 2020 and on beyond, pandemic teaching increased in usage as people started using that jargon or terminology. So most teachers in this time period I looked at used the simple phrase of remote teaching. So I have data on all 3 of those, but I'm only going to refer to remote teaching because that was the bulk of what was being used in those 3 weeks. So I got a whole lot of data, a ton of data, and I decided to break it down using the domains of learning: knowledge, skill, and disposition. Could possibly have done something different, and I encourage you to do that if you're interested. But so I received all this data, and I looked at dispositional tweets, whether they were proactively dispositional or sort of passively dispositional, and came up with approximately 82% of my data had a dispositional element to it. So those in red there is what we're looking at. And even though I was using public domain data, I did go through the IRB process at my university because they prefer that. So we look here, and I realized, again, draft presentation for you, I guess, as well. But I started with March 10th, which was a Tuesday. And I should have laid my data out Tuesday to Monday, Tuesday to Monday, Tuesday to Monday, and I will do that in the final paper. But March 10th through March 15th is what I have here. So then I go into the calendar weeks instead of the weeks of the pandemic. I hope that makes sense to you. But I realized I probably shouldn't have done it that way, but this is where I am today, I guess. So the first use of the hashtag occurred on that Tuesday, the day before, in the United States, at least, everything shut down. So this is, everyone was talking about it and wondering if it was something. Everyone, all of you have this experience, I know. But then all of a sudden on March 11th in the United States, the NBA shut down and everyone goes, oh, wow, I guess this is real. And so on March 10th, one tweet. And then March 11th, percentage wise, that's a big jump to 7. March 15th, though, by that end of that week, really big jump to 57 tweets. And so what we see is use of the hashtag really accelerated in week 1 and week 2 of the pandemic, started to go down in week 3 a little bit. Because teachers were jumping online and going, oh gosh, what am I doing? Who can help me, and things of that nature. And so they turned, in this case, these teachers turned to social media for help, but they also turned to social media to help one another. So it was a very collaborative process that we saw. So I've tried to put in some key takeaways, and I'm not going to just read those off, hopefully. Talking about the significant increase in the number of tweets. And then tweeting peaked on Saturdays and Tuesdays. I'm not sure about Tuesdays, but in the United States, Tuesdays are a very quiet day in restaurants. If they're going to have like a family night and give a discount, they would do it on Tuesdays. I'm not sure yet what that means for my data and teachers, but Tuesdays were a popular tweeting day, as were Saturdays. And Saturdays to me makes sense, but it also tells us they were very much engaged, very concerned perhaps about what was going on, and they were using their personal time over the weekend to figure out what to do and how to do it, and then also helping one another. So early on, not on March 10th, but moving forward from that date, we see a lot of dedication and commitment of teachers spending their time, including their weekends, their evenings, their off time, collaborating and communicating with one another to figure out what to do. And one of the big things they did was share technology ideas like, apps and maybe information on how to use video. That was very popular. So a lot of that was just skill-based information. Here's an app, here's how I'm using it. And others would say, oh, I love that, and they would respond to it. So there's a lot of tweeting going back and on, retweeting, and likes, but not a lot of comments on likes going on. And then when we look into it more closely in a dispositional manner, again, just with the remote teaching, because those other two I was looking at were just sparse at this time, we get a lot of tweets, and then I've broken them down by what was going on. And so I tried to read them carefully and had another person reading them, and we tried to get that agreement about where we stood. Virtually every tweet, not all of it, but a very large percentage of them had a dispositional element to them. Others were what you could say 100% dispositional in nature. So there's a lot of camaraderie going on, people experiencing it and saying, thanks so much, I appreciate you helping me, things of that nature. And guys, we got this. Let's do this. We can do this. That kind of thing was going on too. So neutering in that case, neutering themselves, saying, I'm exhausted. I'm just going to take a beat. Things of that were said. But a lot of it, more than that, was saying, you've got this. This is going to be okay. We can do this. That kind of things. That kind of thing is going on. Then we see a fair amount of humor as well. And the humor could be both positive and negative. in nature, even sometimes in the same tweet. Mostly they were very positive and kind of funny things. They're like, wow, it's kind of things where, this is my first day of being online, nothing worked. And then they would put up like, some kind of little meme or something of that nature that would to show their feelings and their humor about even things that were very frustrating. And humor was especially used to combat frustration. Interestingly enough, gratitude was really popular. Not a huge percentage, but it did show up here. People say, thank goodness I have my family. Thank goodness I have a computer. Or thank goodness that we're all working together in the school. We're all online and we're communicating and helping one another. So gratitude was important. And a few people talked about flexibility. And those of you who are in the teaching field know that flexibility is a really big thing. You have to roll with the changes in the moment, roll with the changes the day before, in the moment, and then afterwards too. So it comes into that sort of an aspect of dispositionally of reflection. So these are some of the larger categories that popped up. We did see a variety of coping mechanisms, but it was pretty clear that people were trying to establish relationships with other people. And they weren't, truthfully, because it is Twitter, they weren't great. There wasn't great depth to that, but they weren't doing it in a Twitter type of way. So building and maintaining relationships, talking with one another, tweeting, I should say, about student engagement and motivation and what they needed to do. So again, thinking about it as they moved into teaching online, which the majority of them had never done before. And what's interesting, it's really not a part of the study, but coming out of my field, is I saw no evidence of any teacher going, geez, I wonder if there's any research on online teaching. Not even once did I see evidence of that. There was I don't know what it was, but I think it was an opinion here. It was just too much was happening at once, I guess. So they didn't have the time to go, oh, let's have a professional development on that, and I will attend a conference. There was no time for that kind of thing. So they were triaging, if you will, their teaching and looking to other teachers on Twitter to help them. Now, what other teachers did, I don't know. So this is only the ones who were on Twitter, obviously. And so they were big about helping one another and creating that sense of we're in this together, and talking about and being engaged themselves and talking about how to engage people. I would say there was a little bit of negative tweeting coming into fall and spring of the 2021 to 2022 year. There's a lot, at least in the United States, a lot of talk about teachers being burnouts and things of that nature. And I imagine elements of that occurred around the world. But in these first 3 weeks, there was almost nothing of a negative nature going on. And when it did happen, it was really about darn COVID, how inconvenient it is. I mean, that to me is a little bit negative of a tweet, but I mean, it was not like, I hate my students, I hate my life. None of that was going on. But there was frustration about technology and other instructional issues. Yeah, a lot of computers collapsing, a lot of apps didn't work, a lot of problems with Zoom, things of that nature. But they were not talking in a negative way about parents or students, so that's very good. But the negative tweets really did jump from my week 2 to week 3. And I think that's the period when they were at first planning to go online, then being online, and adjusting to being online. And as they were doing that, a little bit more of the frustrations came out. But there were no negative tweets directed towards students. In fact, by the end of my 3rd week, I started to see tweets where people said things like, I miss my kids. I see them online, but I miss having them there. I miss being with them. That started happening very early. given what happened later in the pandemic, it is interesting the way teachers came into the pandemic and the way they decided to approach it. It was a very, again, positive, by and large, positive attitude among these teachers who tweet, at least, and very respectful toward everything, including their kids and the parents and one another. So there were no negative attacks. People weren't saying, I hate my life. And so that picture, which I could, one or two teachers might have said in a year later, you know. So to me, I think it's an interesting time period because we could then, 5 minutes, thank you, look at this period and compare it maybe to different periods later on in the past 3 years and see how attitudes changed. And that's what I'm hoping to do. Because we did see in the United States, again, at least, a fairly significant drop or increase, I should say, in the number of teachers leaving the field. And in fact, in the fall of, I think it was 2021 in the United States, yeah, that's when it started, 2021 in fall, people actually would be in a job and quit in September. In my area of Idaho, we had people who said in September, I'm done, and just quit the year. Yeah, not in large numbers, but we started to see that. We don't normally see that in our schools. So it would be interesting, I think, for us to look at different time periods, and social media can give us help in understanding what was going on in schools. And even it should probably have been useful to people to help predict what was going to happen in schools, but I don't think anyone used it as a predictive tool. So just some conclusions. Twitter did work for these teachers. It helped them communicate, helped them to engage with one another. It did the things that we know from the research that people say social media can do for teachers. It helped them not feel isolated, gave them connections, and let them not just receive help or support, but offer that to other people. All right, thank you. And thank you all for your time. I don't know where we are with time, but just go.
Thank you so much, Beverly. We'll have time for questions at the end of all 3 presentations. We have a next group of 3 presenters. I'm not sure if they're in the room here. They do not appear to be. So then our last group, I think, is here. Dr. Mette Halpy and Mette Henviks. Are you here? Yeah.
This is correct, right?
Yes.
It's not like everybody, all the females in Norway are not named Mette. It's written to pair like that. It could be even more, you're from very different parts of
Actually,
it.
let's exit this. Oh, so we have a clicker
Okay.
right there, so you could just use that. I'm going to do this. Let's get this.
Just this one.
Yeah, once I'm just gonna fire it
Yeah,
up here.
yeah.
I'm just gonna get the camera to lock on here. There we go.
And our 2 metas are going to be presenting on simulation as a pedagogical method in teacher education, a collaborative project related to suitability assessments.
Push the arrows on either side.
Okay.
There you
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah. Maybe I'll
Okay, so just present ourselves maybe because I'm Olvi and I'm associate professor in teacher education at the University of Stavanger and also a head of suitability assessment in teacher education. Yes, and I am also Mette Hansen, and I am my profession. I am an assistant professor, but my line of profession is in nursing, social education,
but I'm also responsible for assessing students as far as suitability at the college in southeast of Norway.
So we're going to present our collaborative project. Or it's at the University of Stavanger where we have collected the data. But we also will collect data in your institution as well later.
And hopefully we can translate to all the different colleges and universities which have these students that are in professional studies.
So the presentation structure, we will give you a brief introduction of suitability of simulation as a pedagogical method, and also a brief of the concept of suitability assessment, and then say something about the methodology and our reflection on the preliminary results, because this is a work in progress, and also what kind of implications those preliminary results may have to scientific significance.
Simulation as a pedagogical method, it's an approach which provides the students a way of learning skills and trying skills in a real life situation. It's a safe environment. The students are able to do trials and errors without being in danger of harming anybody else. And they're also in a safe environment with small groups, so that they're able to get quick feedback and also be safe around people that they know. They get both immediate feedbacks from peers, so the fellow students, and also from their teachers. And also for this study, it's important. It's important to know that these students this is the first time that they meet simulation as they use this kind of a method, though. And we were just talking over breakfast. Well, these students past COVID has never even had a test in writing, so this is just one more thing, another layer for them. So for doing simulations, we used the system for best practice. So we followed it regularly. And the first thing you need to do is to do a needs assessment. And this needs assessments, and for these students, it's you want to contribute to free service teachers and the students that are becoming teachers to so that they increase the awareness of their suitability. So they're judged on suitability, both in the practical and the ethical perspective of them. So the scenarios are made in line with pre-service teachers, the teachers with a formal education in being mentors, and in accordance to the learning outcome that is regarding the suitability assessments. Also, to measure does it work, does it not work, we do stress markers for measure stress markers ahead of simulation. We do an initial emotional state and self-efficiency rating before they start simulation, and we also assess how much the students know about suitability assessments prior to simulation and then past simulation. And we also do qualitative interview with all of the students past simulation. The format of this simulation, we use a big scale simulations with experts and peer reviews. There are many students, we break them down into groups of 4. So there's 19 groups. We use classrooms that they know, they're well known for the participants, for safeness. And we also have a strict structure with a time schedule and template scenarios, which the students receive a week ahead of simulation, so they know exactly what to expect and when things are going to be. So the scenarios are developed by in-service teachers, that's teachers that have been working in the field and are working with the college or university, and it reflects some real situations from real life. And in the scenarios, we use the markers that are used in simulations are also these teachers, as the students know. So there is fidelity. We think that fidelity is well thought through. It's based on both earlier students' experience, and it's built to be a safe environment for the students. And we think we believe we are safe in this area. Furthermore, the facilitator, part of the simulation method is this method students, they know her, so she has she facilitates for the whole simulation group. And also in the small group, the facilitators are well known with the procedure, been going through the procedures and know the breaking down or the operation of the learning all the learnings outcomes for the assessments suitability. She's also the lecturer for the day and has first part, which is a tabletop workshop for the students. Before they start is our students' first year, second semester. Before simulation, they have a big group briefing where we talk about the simulation as a general thing, and then they break down the big group into 19 smaller groups randomly. And in these groups of 4, they also have a short briefing before they start. The debriefing and feedback are given immediately after simulations, after the students and the markers. They have a debriefing right there in the room, both with the facilitator then turns into an expert. It will use broken learning outcomes organized site to them, and then are given feedback from the teachers. And they're also giving feedbacks from their peers in a small group before they have a bigger debriefing in large groups, so they're safe, they know what questions might come up, and they have been able to reflect yet another round before they go into a big group. Evaluations, we have done interviews with all the students, and they all say we want more. This is a good way of learning, and also how to prepare make sure that the students are prepared. All the information upon the event is given to the students at least 7 days ahead of time, both orally through lectures, and they're also given their online platform, which is Homlas in this case. And the test of design, this is a pilot, the first trial, and we will discuss the preliminary findings and our way ongoing hereafter. So this is the time schedule. We thought we might want to cover those. So yes, it's very detailed. The students know exactly when they're going to have their lectures. They have tabletop, they have a break, they have time for doing their questionnaires, and then they go then they have a big group to setting, and then they break down into the groups, briefing large groups, briefing small groups. They themselves, amongst themselves, they decide who is going to have the role as a teacher and who's going to have the role as assistant, or who's going to be the time taker in each of the scenarios. It's very important to keep the time, because if one group lacks off, well, then the next group is going to be hang on, so you have to be very on time. And then they start debriefing, and then the students are ready, knocking on the door, and they go in and they are presented with the case. They perform their case, and they have this short debriefing and expert evaluation, and they go on to the next round. So, and they have 15, so they have 15-minute break for text and before every new simulation, so that they have a way of learning as they go on. And when they're done with the scenarios, they have they meet up in a bigger group where they do new questionnaires, and interviews are under them. These are the template scenarios given to the students, so they know what the topic is, the theme. They know their learning outcomes. We translated them into English for you. What is going to happen, what expected. They're supposed to have been to the lecture. This is the literature that they should know. This is what it will contain of, and this is what they're meeting in the scenarios.
So let me just say something about the concept of suitability assessment, because in Norway there are 28 education programs that continuously assess the suitability of their students. And teacher education programs and nursing service programs are part of those 28. And suitability assessment can be seen upon as a stamp of quality in higher education, and then an assurance that the students are qualified for a professional practice. However, suitability assessment is a sensitive and abstract concept, because when the teachers and professors are assessing the students' work, they use objective criteria, but in suitability, they assess sometimes the student's personality, such as the student's self-insight, for instance, and that makes it difficult to create a clear construct needed for the assessment because of the vulnerability and the sensitivity. And also suitability assessment should reveal whether the students have the prerequisites they need being able to practice the profession. And as Mette showed you in the template, you showed the learning outcomes, and they are also the criteria from the national regulations, and they concern the students' ability and willingness to communicate and collaborate, and also to care and facilitate learning for pupils, the ability and willingness to create a positive learning environment and to take responsibility as a role model, the ability and willingness to change unacceptable behavior in accordance with the mentoring, and also to show self-assessment or self-insight related to the future professional role. So the purpose of this study is to address a gap in the existing knowledge about the processes of developing good practices involving suitability assessments. And the research question: how can simulation as a pedagogical method contribute to pre-service teachers gaining increased awareness of their suitability? There are limited published research connected to the processes of suitability assessment. Concerning simulation as a pedagogical method in higher education, there are several studies, both in nursing and nursing in social education, and also several other social studies, but none that we have found concerning teacher education using simulation as a pedagogical method. All the studies that are published are in accordance with standards and best practice, simulation standard, simulation design, and also theoretical perspective that we are using under a self-efficacy
and increasing self-efficacy.
Yeah, that's so the methodology, we have said something about that, but just to sum it up, it's a mixed method approach using both quantitative and qualitative data, where there are two surveys that participants are responding on, or the respondents, before and after the simulation, and then focus group discussion after the simulation. We use the criterion sampling, inviting pre-service teachers in their first year in teacher education, in their second semester, to participate in both the study, both the surveys and the focus group discussions. And then a psychological test battery mapped the awareness of suitability before and after the simulation. There were 72 pre-service teachers who participated. Only 33 of them answered the surveys, both before and after. And it cannot be ruled out that the reason for that is that we use the code that they should, or they had a
They created
they
their own
created
codes.
a code,
Yeah.
and wrote it down on the first survey, and then when they were supposed to do the same code the second time, some of them had forgotten their code. So then we had to just
And the interesting part is that we asked for their mother's first letter, last first name, first letter, and their mother's last name, first letter, and their mom's birthdays.
yeah. Also, of course, there could be other reasons. It was voluntarily that they should respond twice, and in the focus group discussions, all participants, all 72 participated, and there were 19 groups. And the data that we got from those discussions were taken into thematic analysis, where we have developed 3 broad themes. And also triangulation was performed with the results then from the surveys and linked to the preliminary findings in focus group discussions. And as in every research, trustworthiness is important, and we strive to be transparent in the process, and also to take ethical considerations. And the study was granted approval from the Norwegian Center of Research Data, and also the committee. Yeah. So this is a visual for you, a word cloud from the focus group discussions, where the most frequent words that the pre-service teachers used in their discussions, they were talking about stress and challenges, and they were describing the stress and the conflict, suitability and awareness, and also the frustration. And all of these frequent words were developed into the different major themes. So we can say that simulation as a pedagogical method contributes to the pre-service teacher professional development when they demonstrate decision-making and critical thinking. And the findings suggest that the participants, they experience an increased awareness of their suitability for the teacher role. We'll share 3 quotes with you. Pre-service teacher 1 that expressed that I found it challenging that the pupil responded quite different from what I had expected and prepared. I felt stressed and didn't know what to do. So even though they were well prepared, the context changed when the pupil didn't respond the way they had planned, and then they became stressed. And also pre-service teacher 9 stated that it was difficult to face the pupil's problem head on and to solve it quickly. So the strategies of how to handle conflicts, they didn't know what to do when they had used the first, the second, and maybe the third strategy. Then they didn't know what to do. The positive thing is that this is a safe environment, and it's for practice and for training the simulation. So maybe it's okay that it was difficult and they didn't know what to do. And finally, pre-service teacher 11 expressed that the diversity in the classroom emphasizes the importance of the teacher's suitability. I'm more aware of that now. And the awareness is something that the majority of the participants are talking about. So these preliminary findings may give some implication, both practical and ethical implications about pre-service teachers gaining increased awareness of their suitability. First of all, when using simulation as a pedagogical method, an implication for facilitating the simulation is to prepare cases that are related to the students' learning outcomes in their curriculum, so that they are relevant to and realistic. And also, there is an implementation for collaboration in other education programs. We've used teacher education and nursing social education. Yeah.
Other social education programs also
Yeah.
are now coming around.
And there are some ethical implications also because of the process of suitability assessment and the sensitivity in the concept. There may be students in these programs that are in a process where their suitability is particularly looked upon, and the ethical considerations about that. And there are some pitfalls. We have experienced in this project that we cannot emphasize enough the structure.
The students fall into the structure super fast. they learn so fast, much faster. Than they are just boom, 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 boom. Whereas we kind of have to pick up what
And also the peer reviews.
operationalizing
Yeah.
the learning outcomes.
And that they know everything that's needed to be known into detail beforehand. And also a pitfall is working cross-disciplinary because we have quite different backgrounds and disciplines, and we bring.
And in higher education, you tend to be headstrong.
Yeah.
You tend to want to do it our way. So it's selling it in.
Yeah, yeah. And also finally the geographical
Yes.
distance.
It takes us out 8 hours to drive across. So usually.
Yeah. So well, that was it.